Welcome to Idle Clatter International Racing Headquarters. I was asked by somebody on Reddit to start a video blogging series about the restoration of my 1950-something Berkeley SE492. I don't know exactly what year it is. It's the 82nd one made of 666. You can read into that number what you will. I believe it's about a 1957. I'm not entirely sure. I started with this because this is the most car-like aspect of the entire build at this point, which is kind of saying something because this isn't much. I'm just sitting on the floor. This is just the fiberglass top half of the body shell. Then to my left over here is the back half of the Berkeley. Berkeleys were made in three main parts. There's the front half, the back half, and then over there, which I will show you in a second, the third half, which is the bottom tub. Somewhat terrifyingly, the entire suspension design was attached to the fiberglass, sort of hanging from this back half. And I'd also like to point out, this is technically the back seat. For tax reasons, marketing reasons, or some other reasons that were only cleared Biggleswade in 1957, this is a four-seater. And here's the aforementioned bottom half. If you want to call it the chassis, I suppose you could, but that would be a bit of a stretch if we're being honest. Berkeleys were almost entirely fiberglass, but they did have some aluminum superstructure to give some semblance of strength. So this is the back half of the car, and it originally had steel supports that have now rusted away. What that has ended up doing is that the entire back is almost barely attached to the car at this point. And here's a better shot of what remains of the front half. This is some very subtle steel framing that was added that effectively formed the front subframe. And then we can see the aluminum tub here that formed the passenger compartment and the rear frame. The good news is I have every major component. I have the tub, I have the two halves of the top of the body, I have two doors, and I also have a slightly cut up but largely intact hood. At the end of the day, it's fiberglass, so repairing it isn't that big of a deal. The problem is that's essentially where my list of parts ends. Originally, Berkeleys had varying different types of motorcycle engines. There were three main Berkeleys. There was the SE328, which had a two-cylinder 328cc Excelsior engine. There was this one, the 492, which had the same engine but in a three-cylinder configuration with 492 cc's. And then there was the B95, which had a Royal Enfield engine. This is, I think, the second most rare. This is the 492. However, I don't have any of the driveline left. I don't have the differential, which was a bespoke Berkeley piece. I obviously don't have the Excelsior engine. And honestly, even if I did, I'm not sure I'd want to retain it. They're not known for reliability. They produced at most about 17 horsepower. And I've driven one that was repowered with a Honda motorcycle engine. And while that's much more in keeping with the original spirit of the car, the performance is, if nothing else, a little lackluster, even though that particular one was a very nice engineering feat. I'm not sure I liked it as much as an actual car. And that left me with somewhat of a conundrum. Because I don't have a differential for this car, I can't do the typical Japanese motorcycle swap that you see on Berkeleys, which meant that I had to find a car. Cars have many advantages. It would give me a working differential, it would give me a standard H-pattern shifter, and it would also give me usable low-end torque that I want. However, the issue is that Berkeleys are only 48 inches wide, and more or less any modern car engine is far too wide, especially once you account for the wishbones and other ancillaries. So I had to find something that would fit within the very narrow engine bay, I believe it's about 27 inches, of a Berkeley. And that's where this comes in. The 1993 or 1994, I'm apparently not very good at remembering the years of cars I buy, Geo Metro. It has the Suzuki G10 3-cylinder, a 1 liter, about 55 horsepower, and a standard H-pattern 5-speed. It is somewhat, despite itself, a fairly nice little car. It has 144,000 miles on it, it starts right up, I paid $600 for it, and frankly I'm going to be a little bit sad to tear it apart. I haven't driven it extensively because it doesn't have a tag on it, but from what I've experienced, I quite like it. I wouldn't be surprised if another one of these is in my future. And here's the heart of the matter. It's somewhat unique to the US market because other than the Smart Car and probably a couple other cars I'm forgetting, it's one of the only 3-cylinders I can think of that you could buy in the US. I bought it because it was so narrow. However, I didn't account for the width of the transmission. So while the engine itself is only about, I think, 22 inches wide, the transmission actually extends to be 27, which is probably going to pose a problem. Because of the added width of the transmission that I didn't account for, it turns out that that engine isn't actually any narrower, than the other common Berkeley swap, at least from a car standpoint, the Austin A series out of a Mini. However, it still has a couple advantages. The G10 is a little bit shorter, it's a lot lighter, and I also have one that I can tear apart. Okay, so maybe I won't feel too bad about tearing it. And so now the next step is to extract the Suzuki G10 from its geometro-shaped prism. Cheers. But as a quick side note, manufacturers, design more cars where the hood folds all the way back up against the windshield. Volvo, Mercedes to a certain extent, you guys know where it's at. Now the rest of you, get with it. This is really helpful. I'm skipping over the details of the engine removal because it was a fairly straightforward process. My goal with this project is to make the most usable Berkeley possible. I want it to be a car and not a toy like some of the other Berkeley builds I've seen. This is why I'm going through fairly great lengths to use a standard car transmission so it can be used on the highway, and it will have sound deadening and various other luxuries, at least relatively speaking for a Berkeley. Because the car is so narrow, designing the front subframe has some interesting engineering challenges. My current plan, which admittedly changes fairly often, is to use Austin Mini hubs. These are useful because they have built-in ball joints, and also brake parts and wheels are readily available. It will have a double wishbone style suspension. However, the bottom wishbone will be made especially wide, theoretically to wrap around the engine to allow everything to be more compact. The car shouldn't weigh very much. A new Berkeley only weighed 600 pounds, and I'm hoping to keep this one under 1,000. For some reason, I can never seem to manage to remove an engine out of a car without using a giant crowbar. So we have now somewhat violently extracted the G10 from the poor Forsaken Metro, and I guess in the next series we'll start the process of fitting it into a bespoke subframe to fit into the Berkeley. So until then, thanks for watching.
Hey, we got that Austin. They want that Austin. It's time to reach out. Hey yo, we got it. Met a girl, she told me, besides Kenny G, hold me.